So as I think about the power of partnership and we move forward, you're going to find that we're going to partner or perish. Those institutions that try to go it alone, those institutions that really don't see that there has to be much more win-win value propositions, those are the institutions that are going to fail. The institutions that actually are resistant to change, they're going to fail.
That was Michael Baston, president of Cuyahoga Community College, also known as Tri-C. We had an insightful and really inspirational conversation about partnering externally and collaborating internally to create community impact. This is packed with so much great advice from Michael. I hope you're taking notes along the way. We talk about strategic planning, fundraising, assessment, program review, governing boards, change management, and more. It's like a leadership lessons checklist. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Connected College podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Felix. I've helped more than 100 colleges and universities change what they offer, how they operate, and how they're organized to enable student success. And if you're a leader in higher ed and you think that the silos and separations get in the way of student success, then this podcast and the Connected College are for you. We're here to learn and work together to bust silos, question tradition, and forge partnerships so that students feel connected to their college, their community, their coursework, and their careers. Welcome, Michael. I'm so excited about our conversation on how partnerships accelerate economic mobility.
It's great to be with you today, and I love the work that you've been doing.
Thank you. It's great to have you. And as we dive into this, I think it'd be great to start understanding how you got started in higher ed and what you're up to today.
Interestingly enough, I began my career in higher education as a college attorney. So I represented educational corporations, religious institutions, and nonprofit organizations. I started teaching for some of my clients, primarily introduction to business, paralegal studies, those kinds of courses. And I fell in love with the opportunity to engage students in the classroom. And I thought about how those students could ultimately, in my view, become social engineers. How could they, through whatever field of study they chose, make a positive difference in our community? How could they actually make life better? So I moved from the courtroom to the classroom, and now from the classroom to the presidency, where I have the privilege of leading Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland, Ohio. We serve about 40,000 students in Northeast Ohio, and we hope to make a difference in people's lives every day.
That's awesome. What kind of difference are you trying to make in people's lives? I'd love to unpack that a little.
In our community, we happen to be the second poorest big city in America. That is from a financial metric, but that is not a poverty of hope. There's a lot of folks in our community with the right education could actually move up, could actually have their hopes and dreams realized. And so I believe very firmly that the college can be the accelerator of opportunity. And so when you're in a community that has those kinds of challenges, you have to double down on how you're going to help people move forward.
And is that how you define student success? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Is student success making a difference in people's lives and helping them move forward? What's your definition?
Student success oftentimes has been defined as completion. But if you have a person who's poor and you put them in an academic program that ultimately leads them to staying poor when you finish the program, you've got a completion, but is that really student success? So
Right.
for me, student success is helping students find purpose, helping them find a purpose that's going to put them on a path to economic self-sufficiency, and that ultimately can make a meaningful difference in the vibrancy of the communities where they live, where they work, where they serve. Student success is not just about completing a credential, but completing a credential of value that changes the trajectory of your life because it puts you in a place where you can be independent, but also to be a meaningful contributor to your local community.
So you find a purpose, you're contributing, you're independent, you're making an impact. You're not just checking the box. I know you've got 40,000 students and all the great stuff you do. You can't list it all, but what are some of your signature programs or career paths where you're helping students find those areas of purpose and have that impact?
We're fortunate to be in a part of the country that has some of the most world-class healthcare with the Cleveland Clinic, with university hospitals, so many wonderful healthcare experiences. We're also in a manufacturing hub. So not only do we manufacture some of the largest food production manufacturing in the country, but also the medical devices that ultimately help people live longer lives. So programs that we have that are, I think, standout programs are in the healthcare space, in manufacturing, in technology. All of those spaces are very robust spaces for me. What I think I'm as proud of those work is the work that we do with first responders. So we actually have a police academy, a fire academy, EMT. We
Wow.
put out tremendous numbers of nurses, probably the largest nursing program in our region. So we are putting out those folks that are making sure that if you're sick, you're going to get well, making sure that your home is protected from fire and burglaries, making sure that you have the kinds of comprehensive supports that make a community strong. So we're very proud of our community health worker program where we're out in the community helping people navigate the complexities. All of those kind of programs really get to the heart of our mission, which is to strengthen individuals who will ultimately strengthen the region.
How do you work across those and build relationships with those different industry partners, whether it's manufacturing or healthcare or first responders? I'm always fascinated by when people have built these relationships and they have these partnerships that aren't a one-off, but it's something you do on a regular basis. You get in the rhythm of working with folks and understanding their needs. And I would love to hear a little bit about your secret sauce in working with all these folks to have that impact.
I think it starts with shared purpose because at the end of the day, you will not have a good partnership that is a win-win partnership if you don't identify a shared purpose. When we began a lot of work around how we're going to help students who are in shorter term programs, they don't get the kind of federal financial aid. We built a Skills to Succeed campaign with various stakeholders, but primarily business community. How do we build out opportunities for folks who don't have the resources and ultimately are not ready for a longer term degree, but need those training opportunities that give them short term wins? So, with our partners, with business and industry, and with our public officials, with our community sector leaders that are in all of the community facing programs, a lot of the community support programs, we together built a Skills to Succeed campaign where we raised $58 million to actually fund the ability for people to get those degrees or those certificates, those credentials of value that would not necessarily be supported by federal dollars because they're not aid eligible currently. That will enable us to put out more police officers because they don't necessarily need a 2 or 4 year degree. That enable us to put out more folks that are EMTs, more firefighters. That enable them to be able to take those tests that sometimes cost them so they don't take the test to get the certificates that actually put them on a path. It's that kind of work. It is to take those persons who are good with their hands and say, let's get you in a carpentry program. So it's while the academic programs are very important and are paths to further opportunities, there are these shorter term credentials that were not being funded by our federal programs. So we needed our partners who ultimately saw the talent shortages, but also the talent development opportunities to partner with us so that we could actually support the needs of the community. So partnerships start with purpose, finding a joint purpose, a purpose that is more than transactional, a purpose that seeks to be transformational, and being thoughtful about the kinds of things that our students need to meet the challenges that our community has. For example, when we did our Skills to Succeed campaign, one of the things that we got money for was to help provide all of the resources that are wraparound to actually getting the credential. If you are in a community that has limited transportation, how do you find a way to help them afford to be able not only to go to school, but then also to go to work? How do you think about the childcare infrastructure that's needed so that people can go to work? All of the social determinants of work, we began to do those kinds of efforts, and we continue that effort with our Greater Cleveland Food Pantry and our food bank and other specific nonprofits in our community that are part of the sort of employment going culture, work going culture. So you have to partner with a number of people, but you start with that shared purpose.
That's a really great approach where you're finding that shared purpose and the mutual benefit, and you're reaching out to folks to understand what they need in the workforce and what their goals are. And then you're thinking through the programs to get folks there, short form, long form, and the wraparound services, childcare, transportation, the enablers. I really appreciate that holistic approach. And it sounds like that's part of your approach to this holistic view of students' success and the way you have to partner to make it happen. Could you talk a little bit more about that? It starts with shared purpose, and clearly the financial piece is critical, but talk a little bit about how partnerships enable student success, because I think everybody agrees in concept, but then lots of things get in the way, right? Sometimes it's difficult to partner with industry, for-profits and nonprofits working together, or schedules get in the way, or cultures clash, or whatever it might be. So how do you actually make these partnerships work once you have the shared purpose?
Shared purpose has to transition into shared planning. So I'll give you a perfect example. We have a scholar house. We worked with the county's Metropolitan Housing Association. We worked with a number of other nonprofits in the community where we built with our housing sort of anchor 40 units for single parents who ultimately are going to school, staying full time in school. Their children have childcare in the facility downstairs. The parents have computer labs and get wraparound supports within the facility. They can stay until they earn up to a bachelor's degree. And then we have off placement counseling. So as they get their degree and we put them in jobs, they then transition into permanent housing opportunities. Here's a perfect example where ultimately we come together with various different community stakeholders and build an interconnected pipeline of talent. So these folks are now going to be working viable in the community, but in the time that we're preparing and the investment we're making with them, they have a safe place to live. They don't have a child care issue. They're actually able to go to school, which is right across the street from one of our locations. So that is a perfect example of a communal investment, a communal partnership to create the talent that we need in our community, to build intergenerational wealth, to make sure that the younger children see their parents getting an education and having the support so that they can be successful. Those are the kinds of things that one can do practically in a community with partners that actually makes a real difference. The planning, the execution, the efforts together become critical. And when we think about even the other opportunities for business and industry, you have to first identify the critical need of the business and then propose a partnership model that creates, for us, earn and learn. So we've built a number of earn and learn opportunities for our students, where they may go to school with us 2 days, they may work at a work placement for 3 days. So they're getting practical experience, they're getting paid, and our partnership is producing the ability of us to educate the workforce and get them out in critical areas. So these are the kinds of very tangible strategies that an educational institution and their community partners can engage in, where they can actually address the talent development challenges of their region, address the economic challenges of their region, and actually strengthen the vitality of their community. It's all about intentionality. If we are not intentional, and if we can't identify the points of partnership, if we don't have that shared purpose, that shared planning, we can't then produce the alternative opportunities that strengthen communities.
When you put it like that, it makes perfect sense, because if student success was as simple as a great experience in the classroom or in the shop, and that would get you where you needed to go, you could do it on your own. But once you start thinking about transportation, housing, childcare, placement, all those other aspects, clearly you need to partner, because in order for the credential and the experience to have value and to, like you're saying, to have impact and to uplift communities, supply has to match demand, and it has to be something that employers need. I appreciate that. How do you do that needs identification? Do you have advisory boards, or how do you work with folks to figure out the skills they're looking for, the emerging roles, where they see gaps, opportunities?
I think that some institutions don't take advantage of what they already have in place. It's not another subcommittee, it's not another focus group, it's not another advisory group. You have a board of trustees. Most boards of trustees are very influential people. In some instances, in public institutions, fairly politically connected, or in the business community or civically connected. That right there is your first focus group. Those are the folks who actually can help you bring the critical conversations that you need to have to build things out. If you have a foundation, most of our colleges have foundations. Do we actually activate the power of the people who are already there helping you? In our case, we built a President's Society. We wanted students to become mentored by members of our foundation board. We wanted our foundation board members, who are presidents of banks and presidents, head of law firms, and all these folks, we wanted them to actually have the experience of working with our students, of understanding who our students are. And that specific set of engagements further strengthen their commitment and dedication to what we're doing, and ultimately gives us advice and information of spaces where opportunities are, places we should go next. So it's not always a large call with cold calls with folks you don't have relationships with. Start with the people who are already invested in you, that may be stranded assets in your organization. They may be people that you don't tap into and see that they are your multiplier effect. That is what we have done, and we've been fairly successful in that.
And it's such a good point, because the tendency is always to add, right? We need to create a new committee. We need to create a new task force. We need to get a new group together. But starting with what you already have and taking full advantage of the people that are already connected to the college and already invested in you and already have that shared purpose just makes a ton of sense. I wonder, you're building these partnerships to help students succeed, and it's curricular, it's co-curricular, it's transportation, it's housing, it's placement, it's childcare, it's this holistic view. What's changing about that? Is this getting easier to do, harder to do? Is technology changing how you partner? Shine up your crystal ball for us. What's changing about all that?
Clearly, with the continued efforts in the technology space, we have to be mindful of new opportunities. And some people decide that technology is the great evil. It's going to displace people, and people are not going to be able to live, and they're not going to want to get educated because they're just going to go online and get their education that way and all this kind of stuff. I think we have to just say, relax. When people thought that TV was going to kill radio, there's still people listening on radio stations, and may not necessarily be on a little box anymore, but people are getting podcasts off iHeartRadio right now, and other Spotify and all these other. So I think we have to be very careful not to be hysterical about the transition, but how do we maximize it? How do we utilize it? We are thinking about student success every day and how you streamline some of the work that you're doing. Right now, we're in a technology audit. We have oodles of technology. And when you think about all the technology, we bought it because we had different pain points. But if you are not actually looking at the pain points, looking at the technology, ferreting out what you don't need and strengthening what you do need, ultimately you have a collection of tactics and no strategy. This age requires much more strategic engagement, much more strategic thinking, and not just simply having a collection of tactics addressing pain points that actually is masquerading as a strategy. So as I think about the power of partnership and we move forward, you're going to find that we're going to partner or perish. Those institutions that try to go it alone, those institutions that really don't see that there has to be much more win-win value propositions, those are the institutions that are going to fail. The institutions that actually are resistant to change, they're going to fail. We are seeing colleges close and merge. We are seeing the whole movement, the tear the paper ceiling movement, where skill-based hiring is something that employers are fully engaged in. That changes the sort of dynamic about the value of credentials and the expectation that maybe not everybody needs a 4-year degree, or people need the kinds of degrees that are going to make degrees of difference. So it is important for us to recognize in this sort of changing landscape, how do we take stock of where we are? How do we lower the temperature on the sky is falling and nobody's coming to school and no, you don't need school anymore? And really think deeply about to what end? That is the ultimate question that I ask myself. Whatever I'm doing, the question is to what end? What is the purpose? What do we expect to accomplish? Or stated another way, what is our impact? We focus so much on outcomes. We have not focused enough on impact. And let me just give you one example in this regard. If you are poor and you get into early childhood education as your degree, and you get that degree, because of the low wages, you'll remain poor. So the college gets credit for you completing, but did it make a difference? I now can take that same student, I can take them through my entrepreneurship center, help them become an independent operator of home-based childcare. Now, they only have to take care of 5 children instead of 26, and they can actually buy the home they're renting because now they actually can build wealth with the same degree. With if they were working for someone else, they would remain poor. So it is time for educational institutions to think deeply about the academic programs we offer. To what end? What is going to actually accelerate the mobility of our people? And what partners do we have to ensure that acceleration actually happens?
What I love about that, the story of it's not just early childhood education, it's also entrepreneurship. And when you couple them together is when you actually create not just the outcome, but the impact. That also seems like a form of partnership, right? You're partnering internally as you develop these programs. Are there other things like that where you're coupling 2 different sets of skills or 2 different programs so that you're creating those kinds of impacts?
We have an approach that is really what we call a multi-pathway approach to education. So you can come into our educational experience in a multitude of ways. You could come in for our schools, which have our degrees, and that's associate's or bachelor's degrees. You could come into our workforce training academies where there are shorter term credentials that get you placement and you can make a living wage right away. You can come into our Institute for Community Impact. That institute is for those folks who don't, maybe adult diploma, GED, English as a second language, to get on a path. That's another way in to our program. So we also have a corporate college. So this is where we have all of our continuing and executive education. So you get a graduate school experience at a community college price. So we, for example, took our Center for Entrepreneurs and coupled it with our School of Business, and we pitched in a pitch competition building food trucks as mobile teaching kitchens. Now, we took these 2 separate parts of the college, had them collaborate, and they won the competition. And now we will actually have a mobile teaching kitchen in the community where the students will learn how to actually run their own food truck, They'll be doing it with healthy foods in communities that need those healthy foods. They're learning. We have students who are in marketing that are participating, students that are in graphic design that are participating, students that are in hospitality that are participating. Our basic business students are participating, so that it is a multidisciplinary effort for students to have practical experience, real world experience in this context. That happens at our institution all the time. We will take different parts of the institution to create the synergy that supports the students' mobility. That's the critical thing. We want students to have economic mobility. We also want to build their cultural capital. And ultimately, that is going to propel them forward.
Love that approach to partnering internally and combining it's the graphic design, it's the marketing, it's the culinary arts, it's the entrepreneurship, all working together. And I want to go back to something you said about how you're relentlessly prioritizing by asking to what end. And you mentioned you're doing a technology audit. As people are thinking about the future and there's skills-based hiring and there's new technology and there's new partnerships, how do you make those tough decisions about things you're going to stop doing so that you can, so that you can do more or different or better things as you're adjusting? I feel like what gets in the way of people adapting sometimes is just the accumulation of all the yeses they've said in the past as they've added stuff. How do you tackle that?
For me, it is a recognition that the collection of tactics has not been a strategy. And so resetting your efforts by starting with strategy, because the strategy is what is critical. If you don't know, what the logic model is, if for lack of a better term, if you don't know what is the delta, what's the change that you expect to see, you won't be able to best prioritize what stays and what goes. So I think people have to step back and have to really be honest about the collection of tactics that have been masquerading as a strategy in your institution. And to start to say, these are the 2 or 3 big bets. These are the levers that we believe if we invest in these spaces, these are going to be the accelerators to answer the question, to what end? For example, in our institution, we have 3 big buckets, 3 pillars of our work and transformation. We believe that you have to start by activating people in potential. You have to start with making sure that your professionals are appropriately developed. You can't have people serving people who actually don't know what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they should do it. So professional development for us is a critical investment. And that means that stopping things, not doing things, you can list all the things you're doing in professional development as an example and see, does any of this stuff help us get to our goal? And if it doesn't, these are the things that we stop. The second big bet is aligning path and purpose. We've got to centralize this idea of focusing on purpose first, because students will change majors 5 or 6 times. If you identify purpose early on, you will reduce the number of times students change majors. If you actually organize the path in a way that gives them enough flexibility so that they can commit to something, they will commit. But if you just leave it like, hey, good luck, this is a great world, figure out what you want to do, what's the land of the possible, walk a while with possibilities, and not focus on purpose, then you can't expect them to ultimately not do 7 different majors and spend 9 years in a 2-year school. The third is really about amplifying our community impact. At the end of the day, we're a community college. We should be able to demonstrate the investment that people make has these tangible returns on the investment for the community. So if you're looking at all the stuff you're doing and you can't tie it to a tangible return to the community, why are you doing it? So for us, that committing to those 3 very specific strategic approaches allows us to actually put in the column, must have, maybe have, no longer needed. And then you begin to do your reallocation of resources so that you can effectively meet your goals and objectives.
Yeah, you're not like streamlining for streamlining's sake. You're saying if our career paths and our purposes are better aligned, then students don't change majors. They don't leave credits on the table. There are all these downstream positive impacts for the student and for the community and for the college. So I feel like you've given us a really good view into these partnerships and collaborations internally, programmatically, and externally with the community, thinking through wraparound services and how you identify needs and how you leverage what you have. And you've also talked about how things might change, skill-based hiring, workforce Pell, technology change. As we wrap up, what's your best advice for people to those changes?
Be honest with people. Oftentimes, educational institutions like to show the sunny side of the street, and we are not always honest about our data. We're not always upfront. For some, the college that you put out in front of people and the college that actually is impacting people's lives are disconnected at times. Because no one wants to talk about all the things that aren't working. We like to focus on the things that are. But those institutions in the future that are going to actually own the future are those that can be honest with themselves, to recognize shortcomings, and not to play a blame game, but to simply acknowledge that we have things that we can do better, that we must do better, that we can't be afraid to try new things. We have some people in our colleges that are weebies. They look at any new challenge and say, we be here before you got here, we be here after you leave. And ultimately, they are the sort of cave people, the committee against virtually everything. They don't want any kind of change. When you see other institutions like you close, then those cave people have to learn that you got to come out that cave. And those weebies have to understand that you won't be part of the folks that are here if we don't do the things that we need to move forward. So I think I say to all of those that are listening, it's important for institutions to be honest, not to blame people. Whatever you did to get to where you are, the circumstances may have influenced the decisions. But where you are now and where you can go have to be guided by this idea that if we don't do what we need to do, we won't be here to do anything. It's not a scare tactic, but it is a recognition that if your institution is no longer here, there are many people who will never get to where they need to be without that institution. So as much as you are thinking about your own personal survival, what we should be thinking about is the survival of the hopes and dreams of people who, but for us, may never get to the place where they deserve to be and will not have the communities that deserve the wonderful talent that we can produce.
Amazing. Amazing advice and amazing insights into partnership and collaboration to help students succeed. And what I appreciate so much from this conversation is how focused you are, tying things to the impact, to the purpose, being intentional, not a collection of tactics, but a true strategy. And it's no secret why you've been so successful and the impact you've had in your community. Great to see it. And I hope this helps folks have that same kind of impact in their community.
It was great to be with you today, and thank you for the invitation.
Thanks for listening to the Connected College podcast. Subscribe to my Connected College newsletter at elliottfelix.com for insights and excerpts from my upcoming book, tools you can download, and special offers. You can also find more information about talks I've given, articles I've written, and upcoming events there. And please support the podcast by rating and reviewing it wherever you're listening. Let's create connected colleges where students will succeed.